Imagine waking up to the news that the world as you know it could have changed overnight. Not just for one country, but for millions across continents. In the early hours, as most people were still asleep, a decision was made in the highest corridors of power. One that could have set off a chain reaction with consequences echoing for generations. This is not a story of what happened, but of what almost happened. Welcome to Us versus Venezuela, the untold story of a near-miss catastrophe. Today, we peel back the layers of secrecy, political maneuvering, and human drama that nearly plunged two nations, and perhaps the world, into chaos. For years, tensions simmered between the United States and Venezuela. The headlines told us about sanctions, oil, and fiery speeches, but behind closed doors, the stakes were far higher. In this episode, we'll take you inside the rooms where decisions were made, where military options were weighed, and where the fate of a nation hung in the balance. We'll hear from experts, eyewitnesses, and those who lived through the fear and uncertainty. We'll contrast the official narratives with the stories that rarely make it to the front page. And most importantly, we'll explore how close we came to a catastrophe that could have rewritten history. So why did the world come so close to the brink? What drove the United States to consider military action against Venezuela's capital? And how did ordinary people on the ground experience those tense hours? Stay with us as we unravel the untold story, piece by piece, and reveal the human cost behind the headlines. To understand how the world reached this precipice, we need to rewind and examine the roots of the U.S.-Venezuela standoff. Venezuela, once the wealthiest nation in South America, has long been a country of paradoxes, blessed with vast oil reserves, yet plagued by political turmoil and economic collapse. The rise of Hugo Chavez in the late 1990s marked a turning point. His socialist revolution, anti-American rhetoric, and nationalization of key industries set Venezuela on a collision course with Washington. When Nicolas Maduro succeeded Chavez, the situation only intensified. The U.S. accused Maduro's government of corruption, human rights abuses, and rigging elections. While Venezuela's leaders blamed Washington for economic sabotage and imperialist ambitions, by the late 2010s, Venezuela was in crisis. Hyperinflation, food shortages, and mass migration gripped the nation. The U.S., under President Donald Trump, ramped up sanctions and recognized opposition leader Juan Guaido as the legitimate president. The diplomatic gloves were off. But behind the scenes, something far more dangerous was brewing. Intelligence reports suggested that the Trump administration was considering military options, including airstrikes on strategic targets in Caracas. The world watched nervously as rhetoric escalated. But few knew just how close the situation came to boiling over in this episode. We'll go beyond the headlines to explore the secret deliberations, the intelligence briefings, and the moments of hesitation that prevented disaster. We'll contrast the official statements with leaked documents and insider accounts, revealing a story that is as much about personalities and power as it is about politics and policy. As we move forward, keep in mind that history is often shaped not just by what leaders do, but by what they almost do. The night the world almost changed began like any other in Caracas. The city, nestled in a valley and surrounded by mountains, was restless but unaware of the storm brewing thousands of miles away. In Washington, the White House Situation Room was alive with tension. Senior advisors, military officials, and intelligence chiefs gathered around a long table, their faces illuminated by the glow of classified briefings. The question on everyone's mind: should the United States launch a targeted strike against Venezuela's capital? The stakes were enormous. Supporters of intervention argued that Maduro's regime was on the verge of collapse, that a decisive blow could tip the balance and restore democracy. Opponents warned of unpredictable consequences: civilian casualties, regional instability, and a possible confrontation with Russia. One of Venezuela's key allies. As the debate raged, President Trump listened intently. He was known for his unpredictability, his willingness to break with convention, his belief in the power of military strength. Some advisors urged caution, reminding him of the lessons of Iraq and Libya. Others painted a picture of swift victory, a chance to send a message to America's adversaries. The room was thick with uncertainty, every word weighed and measured. Outside, the world remained oblivious, but inside those walls, history teetered on a knife's edge. Meanwhile, in Caracas, rumors began to swirl. Social media lit up with unconfirmed reports of unusual military activity. Residents exchanged anxious messages, trying to make sense of the growing unease. For many, it was a night of sleepless anticipation, a sense that something momentous was about to unfold. The fate of a nation, and perhaps the world, hung in the balance, waiting for a decision that could not be undone. As dawn approached, the world's major newsrooms were already on high alert. Journalists in Washington, London, and Caracas scrambled to verify rumors, chasing leads from anonymous sources and government insiders. The BBC, CNN, and CBS all received tips that something extraordinary was unfolding behind closed doors. In the age of instant communication, information and misinformation spread at lightning speed. Social media became a battleground of speculation, with hashtags like #CaracasStrike and #UsVenezuela crisis trending worldwide. For ordinary Venezuelans, the uncertainty was suffocating. Parents kept their children home from school, businesses shuttered their doors, and the streets grew eerily quiet. Inside the U.S. government, the debate reached a fever pitch. Intelligence officials presented satellite images and intercepted communications, painting a picture of a regime on the brink. Some argued that a limited strike could cripple Maduro's military infrastructure without triggering a full-scale war. Others warned that even a surgical attack could spiral out of control, drawing in regional powers and igniting a humanitarian disaster. The president weighed his options, aware that every move would be scrutinized by allies and adversaries alike. In Caracas, the government scrambled to project strength. State television broadcast images of military parades and patriotic speeches, while officials denounced American imperialism and called for international solidarity. Yet behind the bravado, there was fear. The Venezuelan military, though large on paper, was plagued by defections, equipment failures, and low morale. Commanders wondered if they could withstand a modern air assault. Civilians, meanwhile, clung to their phones, desperate for news and reassurance. The city held its breath, caught between hope and dread. As the world waited for a decision that could change everything in the midst of this uncertainty, voices from the ground began to emerge, painting a vivid picture of life under the shadow of potential war. Vanessa Silva, a journalist living in central Caracas, described the surreal atmosphere in her neighborhood. It was as if the city itself was holding its breath, she recalled. People were glued to their phones, whispering rumors, checking the sky for signs of aircraft. Every loud noise made us jump. Her account was echoed by countless others, shopkeepers, students, parents, each grappling with a mix of fear and disbelief. For many, the threat of foreign intervention was not just a political abstraction, but a terrifying possibility that could shatter their lives in an instant. Internationally, the crisis drew sharp lines. Russia and China, staunch allies of Maduro, issued stern warnings against any U.S. military action, calling it a violation of sovereignty and a threat to global stability. The United Nations convened an emergency session with diplomats trading accusations and appeals for restraint. In Latin America, neighboring countries braced for a potential influx of refugees, while opposition leaders in Venezuela saw a glimmer of hope that outside pressure might finally bring change. The world's attention was fixed on Caracas, but for those living there, the focus was intensely personal on family, safety, and survival. As the hours ticked by, the sense of impending crisis deepened. Supermarkets saw long lines as people stocked up on essentials. Hospitals prepared for the worst, quietly reviewing emergency protocols. Yet amid the anxiety, there was also resilience. "We've survived so much already," Vanessa said. "Whatever happens, we'll find a way to endure." Her words captured the spirit of a city and a nation on the edge, waiting for the dawn as the world watched. The machinery of diplomacy shifted into high gear. In Washington, last-minute calls were made to key allies in Europe and Latin America, seeking support or at least understanding for whatever action might be taken. The Pentagon prepared contingency plans, ready to execute a range of options at a moment's notice. In New York, the United Nations Security Council convened in an emergency session, ambassadors from around the globe voicing urgent appeals for restraint. The Russian and Chinese delegations were particularly vocal, warning that any attack on Venezuela would be met with severe consequences and could destabilize the entire region. Back in Caracas, President Maduro appeared on national television, flanked by military leaders. His speech was defiant, denouncing what he called Yankee aggression and vowing that Venezuela would never surrender. Yet behind the scenes, there was confusion and disarray. Some senior officials reportedly urged Maduro to seek a diplomatic solution, fearing that the country's battered military could not withstand a U.S. assault. Others pushed for a show of force, hoping to rally the population and deter intervention. The government's official statement, hastily drafted and unsigned, did little to reassure a nervous public. Meanwhile, ordinary Venezuelans faced impossible choices. Should they stay in their homes or seek shelter elsewhere? Was it safer to keep their families together or to split up in case the worst happened? Social media was awash with rumors. Some claimed to have seen foreign aircraft overhead. Others reported explosions in the distance. In the absence of clear information, fear filled the void. Yet even as anxiety mounted, there were moments of solidarity. Neighbors checking on each other, strangers offering rides, communities coming together in the face of the unknown. In those tense hours, the world teetered on the edge of a decision that could have changed the course of history. Every conversation, every rumor, every flicker of hope or fear was magnified by the knowledge that, at any moment, the unthinkable could become reality. In Caracas, families huddled together, listening for distant sounds that might signal the start of something irreversible. In Washington, leaders weighed the cost of action against the price of inaction, knowing that a single order could ignite a firestorm across continents. The fate of millions hung in the balance, suspended between war and peace, chaos and order. And as the sun rose over a city bracing for the unknown, one question echoed in the minds of people everywhere. Would this be the day the world changed forever? Or would the catastrophe remain a near miss? A story whispered about in the shadows of history. The answer, as we'll see, would depend not just on the decisions of presidents and generals, but on the resilience and courage of ordinary people caught in the crossfire of global power.